Tom Carey is an Air Force veteran who held a top secret crypto clearance. He's also racked up a long list of achievements, including being a best-selling author and a special investigator for the J. Allen Hynek Center for UFO Studies. He's also got an interest in anthropology as well as Roswell. In fact, there are few researchers or investigators on the planet with more knowledge than Tom on the 1947 Roswell clash. He, along with co-author Donald Schmitt, recently released their latest offering, Touched by Roswell, and Tom's joining us now. Hi, Tom, how are you?
Nice to be with you, Dean.
Touched by Roswell is another book offering and quite an kind of follows a line of books that you and Donald have released over the years. Where did you come up with the idea? Because this one has got quite a unique flavour.
Yes, this, Dean, is actually our 10th book that Don and I have co-authored since 2007 was our first one. This is our 10th offering to date. And it came about because our previous book called Roswell, the Ultimate Cold Case Closed. I wrote a chapter in it called Touched by Roswell. And it was so popular that we thought, well, because I'm always thinking, oh, this is our last book. This is our last book. Well, Don got the idea, let's do a whole book on the people, the famous, the rich and the famous that have been touched by Roswell over the years. And that's how the book came about. I'm looking to see how many pages. I got the book ready.
Right.
Not to give it a plug, but we have 240 some pages in the book. We talk about, there are 125 names or people that we cite in the book as being amongst the rich and the famous.
Okay.
60 of them are smaller captions with just a sentence or two about them, but we go in depth for 65 of them. 65 of the rich and famous, we do in-depth critiques of them and how they became touched along the dusty trail of life.
Right.
As they would say in Australia, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
The dusty trail of life, how they became touched by Roswell.
Okay. Who are some of the bigger names that you mentioned in the book?
Well, I always start off with the first one. His name is Prince Hans Adam of Liechtenstein, the country of Liechtenstein, which is also a city. And he's the head of state. Back when he became interested in Roswell, he was the Crown Prince Hans Adam II. Now he's the head of state, the richest head of state in Europe, and the fourth richest head of state in the world. We're trying to get some of that head of state wealth flowing our way, but
Yep.
but anyway, in 1990, the prince funded a meeting of all the firsthand witnesses that we were aware of in 1990. He funded a meeting of them in Washington, D.C. to record their statements, videotape their statements for posterity. And I can tell you now, Dean, they're all gone. Right now, they are all dead.
Wow.
But there were 27 of them, 7 of them in this confab in Washington, and he recorded all of their statements. 2 years later, they produced a video called Recollections of Roswell, and it showed all of the 27 witnesses. These were firsthand witnesses, and even today I use that. It's a I have the VHS version.
Yep.
I still use it as a resource to what did so and so say, that sort of thing. And so that was Prince Hans Adam's touch with Roswell, and that bringing 27 people from all over the country, some out of the country, putting them up in expensive Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
renting a big hall, that costs some money, right? But it was his contribution to the Roswell case.
Yeah.
So that's who I start with. We have actors and actresses, Shirley MacLaine, the big Broadway singer. Boy, you know, the names are, I got to look these.
Well, just before you go on.
Gordon McRae from Oklahoma.
Right.
Oklahoma, where the thin sign down the yeah, him. Oh my goodness,
What about Shirley MacLaine? I've mentioned to a few people, if there's one person who deserves an apology on her beliefs about, out of body experiences and with what's going on now, it's Shirley MacLaine.
Yes. Well, Shirley MacLaine, you're absolutely right. She's into like channeling, all that sort of stuff. Well, after our second book in 2009, she interviewed Don Schmitt and myself. And I always had a feeling that we were not, because, we're talking about Roswell, a nuts and bolts type case.
Yeah.
And I had the feeling that we were not far out enough for her.
Right.
She wanted somebody who was really out there. This is my own opinion. But she interviewed us, and she also had a conversation with former President Jimmy Carter about UFOs. And Jimmy Carter revealed to her that there were physical wreckage and that sort of thing. They had them, but he would have to deny it publicly. But he told her about, yes, we do have stuff, and it's very serious and all that sort of stuff. And, but he never revealed it, and she did reveal that she did have that conversation with him. So
yeah.
But I always felt that we were just not quite far out enough.
Right.
Even though we really like, she's a terrific actress.
Yep. One man who I grew up idolizing, who wrote the foreword in the book, Roy Thinnis, of course, star of the show The Invaders. I mean, I loved that show as a kid growing up.
So did I.
And I think it stopped at 2 seasons, which was unfortunate, but it was such a great show, and it's being rerun at the moment on MeTV.
It's still showing here.
Yeah.
He's got the 3 a.m. morning slot all to himself.
Right.
But he's in the second or third reruns here. There's some Saturday night, and I always. They originally were on at midnight, which I would watch them, but I don't stay up to 3 a.m. But he had the first alien type show that I can remember. It was 1967, called The Invaders.
Yep.
And I remember at the time, I was, oh, this is the greatest. This is the greatest. I look at those shows now in present time and say, oh my goodness, it looks like they're writing the script as they go along,
Right. Yep.
Because they didn't have all of the computer enhanced things that they do with images.
No.
But he had the first one, and I always wondered why he did not, because he had the looks, he had the voice, he had the athleticism, why he didn't become another Paul Newman or
Steve McQueen
Steve McQueen, yes.
Yeah. I mean, he did get starring roles in a lot of movies, but as far as I always remember him, and he was typecast in that show. I think I read where he was kind of not that keen on taking the role because he didn't want to be typecast. But as I understand,
I think he was typecast.
And he's also a UFO believer, I understand.
Oh yes, he's been down in Roswell. They have the International UFO Museum, and every year at the festival, they have a UFO festival. It just got over. It's every July, the first week in July. They have guest of honor at the International UFO Museum. Every year they have a guest of honor, and he's been the guest of honor at least 3 times. And of course, I met him, with Don Schmitt. He's good friends with Don. And of course, he's a UFO. He knows a lot. And on his show, he would the 1967, he would have a name star would guest appear, and one of them was an actress named Susan Strasberg.
Yes, loved her.
Yeah, and we had a story about her that someone in her family was involved in the Roswell case. It was either uncle. It was either an uncle or some member of her extended family was firsthand involved in the Roswell case, being an officer in the Air Force. We could never pin that down. Roy Finnis, we asked him, and he couldn't remember if she ever told him about that or not.
Mm-hmm.
But we did contact Susan's brother, and he would not talk about it. So we could never pin that down.
Right.
But that's a story that's still out there that we're hoping somebody knows something about it.
Wow.
So we didn't. I don't think we included her in the book, but we're hoping that somewhere someone will say, "Oh yes, I remember. She told me about that," but that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure it will happen. I mean, I'm thinking just more recently with the Pascagoula incident involving Calvin Parker and Charlie Hickson. I mean, Philip Mantle and his team have been able to contact witnesses that actually saw the UFO involved in that occasion that have come forward like 40 or so years later. So they're there.
That's right. Because we our last book called we just called it Case Closed, the Roswell Ultimate Cold Case Closed. Is all of the firsthand witnesses that we are aware of are dead, all of them. There may be some out there that we never contacted, that we don't know about, might still be alive, we don't know. But of all the ones, and we do have over 600 first and secondhand witnesses that we have interviewed for Roswell. Not one of them has talked about a balloon, I can tell you that.
Yeah.
But we have over 600, and of the first-handers, all are gone. All are gone. And the second-hand witnesses, the children, they're starting to go too. So at some point there'll be nothing left to.
Yeah, Tom, what got you so fixated on Roswell?
Well, everybody has something that they're, whether it's a hobby or you know what I mean, that your music. Oh, I love playing the piano. Something that really gets to them. And it would, for me, although I do love music, when I read the Roswell Incident book in 1980, the first book about Roswell, it just blew me away, because I had been interested in UFOs as a teenager. But when this Roswell book came out by Charles Berlitz and William Moore, with the research being done by Moore and Stanton Friedman, we're talking about a nuts and bolts craft that crashed, not a light in the sky, not, oh, did you see that? It looked like this was a crash, and it had little bodies. And there was a cover-up, and there were death threats, and it was this mystery for years and years and years that no one talked about. Then all of a sudden, someone talked in 1978, and 2 years later, the first book came out, and that book blew me away. I was no longer interested in lights in the sky or abductions or anything like that. This was a nuts and bolts case, and I became involved in it in 1991 with Kevin Randall and Don Schmitt. And Don and I have been a team since 1998. So 31 years I've been fixated, you know, as far as investigation on this one case, because it's so interesting. It's got everything. It's got intrigue. It's got cover-ups. It's got death threats. And at the end of the line, it's the biggest story ever, or one of the biggest stories ever.
Yeah. Well, more than 70 years later, and with all the research and airplay that's given to Roswell, so you do you believe that an alien ship did crash there?
Absolutely.
Okay.
What am I doing here?
Well, I just thought I'd ask the question because, you know,
Listen, in a legal term, you would say the preponderance of the evidence.
mhm,
There's and using Occam's razor, there's no other conclusion that you can draw.
yeah,
All of the witnesses that we've spoken to, and I would go even further and use the criminal terminology of beyond a reasonable doubt.
right,
It's even beyond the preponderance. It's now beyond a reasonable doubt. That's what happened. It was the crash of an alien spacecraft with 5 occupants. 4 were dead and 1 was still alive.
okay,
Covered it up, but since 1978, the civilians, beginning with Stanton Friedman and William Moore, and following along with Kevin Randall, Don Schmitt, myself, and some others, we're still investigating the case, and
yep,
we believe we've proved it beyond a reasonable.
yeah,
We've been told that by lawyers.
right. What about the general public though, Tom? Do you believe that they're in the majority in their belief that a alien craft crashed there at Roswell?
Uh, well, um, a majority believes that there are UFOs. I'm looking at the latest data. A majority believe that UFOs are quote unquote real, meaning otherworldly something or others.
Yep,
Not everybody knows about Roswell. A lot of people, oh, I've heard about. Isn't that where they had the alien? They don't know, so they don't really have an opinion. But I believe the percentages in the upper 30s, upper 30% believe that it was a visitation by an otherworldly craft and crew. And I believe that if they knew more about it, it would go higher. But that's still a significant amount in the upper 30%.
right, right. Um, Over the years, I mean, over 70 plus years, I mean, Roswell's been done left, right, top, bottom, in every which way you want to look at it, and it's been made into TV shows, into dramas, into movies. Everyone's had their say. Do you think the actual incident at Roswell itself has become sort of diluted over the years? Do you think we may have lost what we
Well,
initially set out to prove?
what what dilutes it is the misinformation that's out there. Those who know that Don Schmitt and I have moved the football. This is the American football
Mhm.
from the 50-yard line down to the 1-yard line of belief. The only thing we're missing is a piece of physical evidence. That's all
Right.
we're missing. So we have brought clarity to the Roswell picture. There, some people who, one of the witnesses who was a rocket scientist that came over with the paperclip Germans, he told his son, who was asking him about Roswell, he says, son, those who know don't talk, and those who talk don't know.
Right.
So
That makes
he took
sense.
that with him to his grave. So there's a lot of talk out there by people who don't know. But I've spent 30 years, and like I said, when I started out actually investigating, we thought there was a crash of the plains of St. Augustine. Well, there wasn't. We brought clarity to this case. We've just written our 10th book together. Our next one and last book is already finished. It's coming out next year.
Wow. Okay.
It's the 75th anniversary of Witness to Roswell, our trilogy. But Roswell is known the world over. Most people don't know that the case has moved forward to where it's beyond a reasonable doubt. Right now, there's an alignment of the stars. The next year is the 75th anniversary. There's going to be a lot of focus on it in July of next year, just like there was in the 50th anniversary. And UFOs today are more popular and they're given more credibility than ever because of this report that the Defense Department was asked to prepare. Now, the report itself is underwhelming at best and a joke at the least, in my opinion.
Yep.
But nevertheless, it has focused attention on the subject, and they did declare that UAPs, as they call them, they don't like the term UFO, that UAPs are real. They're not figments of imagination. The Navy fighter pilots, they've got them on their radar, they've got them on their FLIR sensors, heat sensitive things, and those are real videos. They're not something that somebody hooked up on a computer.
Right.
So they have admitted that much, but the rest are, it's just, oh, well, we don't know what they are. We're going to continue to investigate, but we don't know what they are, and they don't appear to be a threat to national security. But trust us, we'll keep on it. And I'm sorry, when they were given that project to, I understood it to mean this is originated in the Senate. It was from the Defense Appropriations Bill for 2021, and they said, okay, we want a report from the Defense Department of what you know about UFOs. So I'm thinking, oh boy, we're really going to get it now. They're going to go all the way back to 1947, and we're going to really see what they have. Well, what they did is they cauterized it. They compressed the cases studied to the last 17 years. They didn't study anything beyond that Nimitz event in 2004 and the Theodore Roosevelt Navy event in 2014. They just concentrated on 144 military cases, no civilian cases at all, of which there are thousands of good ones. So they concentrated on the military for the last 17 years. They 143 of the 144 cases they looked at were unidentified. The one they were able to identify was, you guessed it, a balloon.
Right.
It was a balloon. But they said, well, we're going to get more sophisticated electronic equipment and blah, 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 blah. And we hope to be able to identify what the unidentified, the 143 unidentifieds were. Well, guess what? I don't need any. I know it. They're vehicles from somewhere else, and I'm sure that people who have seen the videos over and over and over again, they're vehicles. They're unknown. We don't know where they came from. They have properties of speed and change of direction and that no power on Earth has. And so you don't have to tell me that, oh, you'll be able to identify them later when you get better equipment. I don't need that. I have two eyes. I can see. We don't have anything like that. But they put out this report. It was 2 weeks ago tomorrow that, oh, it's we're still on it. We hope to get better equipment and to be able to eliminate things. Well, I've already eliminated things, except that they're otherworldly. That's my conclusion.
I was hoping that we could get some congressional hearings out of this at the least, because I think that's where we could have really made some inroads.
It's a taboo. It's still, Dean, UFOs. The subject of UFOs is still a taboo subject to the people in the limelight, say professionals, political people. UFOs is like it's a career killer. You don't want to have your name. Oh, there goes Senator so and so. Woo! It's a career killer. It's also a number of actors and actresses have come out in favor, but people like doctors and lawyers and political people most professionals don't want their name associated in the same paragraph as the term UFO or
Right,
Roswell,
right.
something like that.
Yeah. Well, look, speaking about Roswell again, what's the biggest smoking gun evidence that you and Don have come across over the years?
Well, the biggest is the number of witnesses that we have that are all talking about an extraterrestrial event. That's the biggest in total.
Yep.
There's two smoking guns. The first one actually was the first key witness that led us on the trail of a UFO rather than something prosaic. And his name was Major Edwin Easley. He was the provost marshal on the old Roswell base back in 1947. So back in 1990, 91, we're still wondering, are we on the right track with this UFO thing? And so Kevin Randall he interviewed Major Edwin Easley. And this is like 1990, 91. And Easley, to every one of Randall's questions, he says, I can't answer you because I'm sworn to secrecy. Well, I'm sworn to secrecy. So every answer he gave was sworn to secrecy.
Right.
So I guess in the sort of a throwaway question, Randall says, well, can you tell us if we're going in the right direction? And Easley responds, well, what do you mean? What direction are you talking about? Well, the UFO direction. So there's a long pause. And Easley says, well, let me put it this way. You're not going in the wrong direction.
Right.
that sort of crystallized our focus. Yeah. Now, the smoking gun you're talking about, if we had a piece of physical evidence like what memory metal is, the memory metal I'm talking about, that would be the clincher.
Right.
But the smoking gun that we have today is a memorandum that General Roger Ramey is holding in his hand at the famous weather balloon press conference on the afternoon of July the 8th, 1947. The headline is already out there that Roswell Army Airfield has captured, they use the term captured, a flying saucer in the Roswell region. That headline is already out there. So within hours of that headline going around the world on the United Press and the Associated Press, that went around the world, within hours, they put together a press conference, not in Roswell, but in Fort Worth, Texas, Carswell Army Airfield, which was the next higher in the command of the 509 Bomb Group, which was stationed at Roswell. That was the next higher office. And General Ramey called in the press, and they brought in a rubber weather balloon that was degrading. It was not brand new, but it was degrading. They brought in an off-the-shelf radar target that behind the scenes they had ripped up. So they put it all into Ramey's office. So first they had Major Jesse Marcel, who from the first believed it was a UFO or a flying saucer. From the very first, he was the first military person out at the crash site. And he had brought a lot of the material back to the base in Roswell, and they had flown some of it to Fort Worth. So he thought he was going to go to meet General Ramey, show him the wreckage, which he did. But Ramey said, well, come with me. I want to go to the map in my map room. You show me where this was. So they go into the map room. And while they're in there, they switch the wreckage from what Marcel had brought to this weather balloon and the radar target. So they come out and he said, Major Marcel, I want you to kneel in front of that, in back of that balloon and the tinfoil radar. And they start taking pictures. And those are the pictures of Marcel that you see kneeling at the feet of this weather balloon and radar target. and he's got a quizzical look on his face, like, what am I doing? You know?
Yeah.
So they took two more pictures of General Ramey and his adjutant, Thomas DuBose, Colonel DuBose, kneeling at the weather balloon. And then two more of Ramey himself. But in the last picture, Ramey is holding this telex, or back in those days, they called them a Twix, Twix, but it's a telex that he had been trying to read between shots.
Mm-hmm.
You know, somebody handed to. So the last picture, he's holding the telex in his hand, but it's face up, facing the camera, right? So you can see there's print on this telex.
Right.
And so over the years, using computerized photographic software, we've been able to read some of the words in that telex that General Ramey was holding. And it talks about a wreck that had been forwarded to Fort Worth the previous day, which it was. It talks about weather balloons would make a good demonstration,
Mm-hmm.
which they did the following day. It talks about a disc, and they put disc in parentheses,
Right.
which, you know, they're not talking about a plane or something else. They're talking about a disc, which is the military term for flying saucer. And they're talking about getting the story out, blah, 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 blah. So that is the smoking gun. And the key phrase there is victims of the wreck. Victims of the wreck. Well, there's no weather balloon that has victims that I know of. It takes it out of the realm of weather balloons. So that is a smoking gun. We've been working on that telex for years. The problem is, you know, it was taken from like 10 to 15 feet away, and it's grainy. And so when you enlarge it, you enlarge the grain as well.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't seem to bring any further clarity to it. And but every once in a while, I bring it out and see if I can work some magic with it on my photographic software. But that's the smoking gun that we have.
Well, Tom, which of the because there's been some deathbed confessions as well on Roswell, which has been the most remarkable?
Wow, there's so many. Edwin Easley was a deathbed confession. Boy, that's a good one. I mean, there's so many of them. A lot of them, well, some of them, you know, the person had promised their family, I will tell you before I pass away what happened. And when they get on their deathbed, they say, if I told you, you would never see the world the same way again. Or if I told you, the world would go into a panic.
Mm-hmm.
And probably the most important one was a sealed statement that the public information officer, Walter Haut, he's the one that put out the famous headline. He carried it around to the two newspapers in Roswell and the two radio stations that they had recovered a flying saucer.
Yep.
And that's the one that goes with the big headline. So Walter Haut took the dictation from Colonel Blanchard, the commander of the base, and he carried it around. Well, for years, we knew Walter well. And we figure, you know, whenever we asked him, he says, well, I just, I carried the declaration around and that. Well, he must have known more than that.
Yeah.
And he was good buddies with the Colonel Blanchard. He was right in the eye of the hurricane. And you're telling me that you weren't interested in what was going on? Well, over the years, from other witnesses, we learned what Walter Haut was involved in. So we drafted a sealed statement of what we thought Walter was involved in. Boom, 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 boom. It was 2 pages long. We said, and now this is 2002. And we said, Walter, would you consider a sealed statement to be opened after your passing? Because he won't talk to us now other than I delivered the press release. He said, okay. So we left it with him. And we said, look it over with your family, your lawyer, take out what is you don't believe is true, add things that you want to add, alter it. And he said, okay. Well, so a couple months went by, and he signed it as not adding anything and not subtracting anything.
Right.
And we opened it in 2005 after his passing, and it told about that he went out to the crash site. He saw the wreckage. He went to the big hangar and saw the bodies. He was told to get lost for a few days by the base commander, let it blow over, and all that sort of stuff. So that, and it was notarized and signed by a witness, and he signed it. So that's probably the biggest deathbed confession, because it lays it all out. And he was right there in the eye of the hurricane, the eye of the storm. But there are a number of others that are interesting. But I think that one is the most important, because it's not only, well, it's signed and notarized, and it was a sealed statement.
Yeah. Has anyone lost their life because they've said too much about what they knew that happened at Roswell?
We think so. We've heard stories of people who had, remember the old saying, loose lips sink ships, that sort of thing. That some people that had loose lips, they say, oh, let's go out hunting this weekend, and guess what? They never came back. We have cases like that. We have another case where a fellow was running, crossing a certain no-go line, and he was shot dead. This is an airman. He was running to a plane, but he was running through a no-go, and they shot him dead. And then there was a woman. She was a secretary at the base hospital. Her name was Marion Bush. And when this was happening, her boss, Colonel Warner, Lieutenant Colonel Warner, said, Marion, follow me. I want to show you something. Because he wanted someone else to look at this too. And she was his secretary. So they went down to the emergency room where these bodies were brought. And she goes in there, and she said she couldn't get it out of her mind for the rest of her life. The eyes that wouldn't close, the large heads and the black eyes that wouldn't close. And that night at the dinner table, she just left sobbing. And her father said, what's the matter? And she just sobbed. She says, they weren't human. I can't get those eyes out of my mind. Well, she turned up a couple of years later. We don't know. She had died from asphyxiation. Someone had either put a plastic bag over her head.
Right.
Or, I don't know. I'm no suicide expert, but I don't know if that's the way to go. But she died of asphyxiation from a plastic bag being put over her head. So was it suicide or was she murdered? We don't know.
Yeah. I mean, there's been a lot of conspiracies over the years. I mean, one that I've heard, and it, you think about it, it tends to make sense. But people like Marilyn Monroe and JFK possibly lost their lives because of what they knew.
That's for me, Dean. That's a bridge too far.
I've
heard those stories. I just that's a bridge too far for me.
It's one of those rabbit holes. I mean, things open up and you can decide where you want to go. And but with what you was talking about, people losing their lives. That's why I think when disclosure is finally, and people right now are trying to get on the right side of it that have been suppressing the truth, but when it finally happens, I mean, it's probably going to be a field day for litigation attorneys.
Yeah, because they were the civilians who had gotten to the crash site before the military. they were sworn to secrecy at the risk of death,
Mhm.
that they would be killed and their families, including their children, would be killed. Now, back in 1947, when the military said something, it was tended to be believed because they had just won World War II, right?
Mhm.
And they were held in very high esteem by our people. And when the military said, "You don't talk about this. This is a national security item, and if you do, we will kill you and we will kill your family, including your children." So they tended to be believed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the airmen on the base, it was a much easier thing to silence them. What they did is they gathered them in hangars, squadron by squadron, and the squadron commander would get up there, and the airmen, because the story went around the base. I mean, everybody knew. So the commanders would get up there and they said, "You guys, whatever you think you know, whatever you think you heard, whatever you think you read, well, if you want to continue with that, you can read all about it in Leavenworth,"
Wow.
meaning the federal prison in Leavenworth. So they were threatened not with death, but with time in Leavenworth prison if they continued to talk about it. And so that made a impression with the airmen.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was another tack that they used, and they did this was there was a radio announcer in town by the name of Frank Joyce. He was the first one to interview Mac Brazel, the rancher,
Mhm.
found all this stuff. He was the first one to interview him at length. And he not only interviewed him once, but twice, and then a third time. So he knew the whole story because working at KGFL, and getting all that information from Brazel and et cetera, et cetera. So he knew a lot, and he wound up. They put him in a insane asylum in Texas for a year.
Wow.
They arrested him and shipped him off to this facility in Amarillo, Texas. He never did get why am I here? Why am I? And they never gave him a diagnosis, but they kept him there for a year and said, "Okay, don't you say anything." Well, he never went back to Roswell. He went to Albuquerque. He never went.
Yeah.
He's from
Yeah.
Roswell, but he never went back. He's buried there. He's buried in Roswell, but he never went back
No.
in his working life. And the reason we know that, at first we said, "Oh, this can't be a true story," but we got another witness who knew Mac Brazel. He was friends with Mac Brazel. He ran a cattle feed, for ranchers, a feed ranch or something. And Brazel was one of his customers. And so after this happened, Brazel comes in one day. He says, "Well," and so the fellow says, "Well, what about this Roswell thing that happened a month or so ago? What really happened?" And Brazel tells him, "Well, I can't tell you because they said if I tell anybody, they'll put me and my family in an insane asylum."
God.
He said, "Oh, that's what they did to Frank Joyce."
Mhm.
So that was one of the threats that they used.
Mhm. Tom, before we close it, do you still have a role at the J. Allen Hynek Center for UFO studies?
No, I don't. I was an investigator, and then I was on the board of directors. And when I hooked up with Don Schmitt, and it happened actually at QFOS, the Center for UFO Studies, J. Allen Hynek Center. Don Schmitt came down. I was in Chicago for the meeting. Schmitt came down from Wisconsin and gave us a little presentation about Roswell. And he said, "I'll be going to Roswell later this month." This is like May of 1998. He says, "Does anybody want to come with me?" And one other fellow, I didn't say anything at first. One other fellow says, "Well, it's 50-50. Now, when somebody tells you it's
Yeah.
50-50. That's what? That's a no.
Yeah.
That's a no.
Yeah.
So I put my hand up. I said, I'll go with you. And we've been a team ever since.
Wow.
And at that point, my focus was on the case, and the meetings at QFOS were just like debate. I mean, I had a fight to stay awake. I had a fight to stay awake because people would just go droning on about this, and I go, oh, my head hurts. I'm getting it. I can't take this anymore. So I resigned shortly
Right.
after that.
Yeah, yeah. And finally, you've also, I mean, I'd love to spend time and talk to you about your interest in anthropology, but we've run out of time. But you got a quick thought on human evolution and where we actually originated from?
Well, being I was a physical anthropologist. That was my specialty, and we certainly do. In fact, I just completed a course in human paleontology at Temple University, and there's a good fossil record for as we evolved from our ape-like ancestors with our most recent, our most closely related ape is the chimpanzee.
Yep.
And we split about 6.7 years ago, but where there's a fairly good fossil record of human development. I don't buy this. The aliens stepped in and gave us a shot at something. I'm sorry, I just don't buy that. The evolutionary trail for humans is fairly well known, but the closer you get to the split point from where the chimpanzee and the human line split, it gets farther. It gets more sparse.
Yeah.
We're filling it in fairly well, and to me, the record is clear. And I don't know if that's where you were going with the.
Well, I mean, it's just a fascinating subject. It's one that I could sit down and listen to someone speak about for hours. But maybe in the future,
it wasn't a straight line. I mean, there's lots. It's like a branching tree of extinct hominid species, human-like species. It wasn't like one developed into the next one, and it was like a Darwinian, as they call it, Darwinian continuum.
Right.
It wasn't that at all. It was this, it was this, it was this, and we're the only ones left. But there are races, which are biological subspecies, I guess, or close to it, because we're all Homo sapiens sapiens. We're not Homo sapiens Neanderthalensis or something like that. We're all the same species and subspecies.
Yeah. No. Well, I mean, as a journalist, I love to hear both sides of the argument. And as I said, I could sit down for hours and hours and just absorb it all in and still not have an opinion. I
love history. I love paleontology. I love human evolution and all that stuff. And I guess for Philip Mantle, I have to give a plug for our new book. We have, like I said, 125 people that we identify, and we do 65 of them in detail, like Dr. Werner von Braun, actress Adrienne Barbeau, Jackie Gleason, Senator Barry Goldwater,
Dan Aykroyd.
I'm sorry?
Dan Aykroyd?
Yes, Dan Aykroyd, David Aykroyd, too. Bill Clinton, President Bill Clinton, Ted Danson, the bartender from Cheers.
Yep.
Paul Harvey, Bob Guccione from Don did that one. I didn't do that one. Larry King, of course. Larry King was a big fan of Roswell. Yeah. And we were on his show several times. And we've got all of these names people will recognize, and you'll say, geez, I didn't know he was John Denver, the singer, was born. His father was a B-52 pilot at Roswell Army Airfield. Wow. And John Denver was born in Roswell in 1943. So he was there during he was only 4 years old at the time, but he was there. Actress Demi Moore was born in Roswell, and The journalist Sam Donaldson has a ranch just north of Roswell, and he doesn't like to talk about Roswell, but he's got a ranch right there.
Yeah. So it's a long list. Tom, the book is called Touched by Roswell. It's available now. You can get it from Amazon or any good book outlet.
Yes,
And then,
Amazon, Barnes and Noble. Yes.
And then next year you're bringing out your final book.
It's got to be the final book. It's the third edition of our original Witness to Roswell book. It's the third edition. It's updated. It'll be the 75th anniversary edition of the crash 75 years ago next year. And we've updated it. And I suspect that unless something like a dramatic happens, with regard to the case, it will be our last Roswell book.
Okay. Well, Tom, thanks very much for your time. Been a real pleasure to speak with you.
All right. Great talking to you, Dean.
Tom Carey, co-author of Touched by Roswell, joining us today.